Ooh, do it again. Do it again. Yay! Wow. I am having fun. I don't know about you, but Max is off the chain. Recognizing these geniuses, Mississippi is bad. As an investigative journalist, an educator, and anti-lynching activist, our fourth inductee was one of the founders of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, known as the NAACP. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Miss Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells. Okay, Ida B. Wells, we have a film.
The people must know before they can act, and there's no educator to compare with the press. Ida Bell Wells was a heroic figure as an African-American female journalist who covered stories that weren't told elsewhere. She traveled throughout the United States as a crusader against lynching and for women's suffrage. Born into slavery during the Civil War in Holly Springs, Mississippi, Wells' parents were politically active in Reconstruction-era politics. They instilled in her the importance of education. After attending Rust College and later Fisk University in Nashville, she began writing about issues of race and politics in the South, and later became the owner of 2 newspapers. Her activism led her to join in the creation of numerous civil rights organizations, including what would later be the National Association for the NAACP. Her passionate campaign against lynching even brought her to the White House, where she called for President McKinley to make national reforms. The achievements of this extraordinary Mississippi native received a Pulitzer Special Citation in 2020, and her legacy is celebrated at the Ida B. Wells House in Chicago, the Ida B. Wells Museum in her hometown, Holly Springs, and monuments in Washington, D.C., Memphis, and Chicago.
Performing a dramatic reading as a tribute to Ida B. Wells is Max Operations Director Emeritus Ida B. Tumlin. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome her.
I am before the American people today through no inclination of my own, but because of a deep-rooted, seated conviction that the country at large does not know the extent to which lynch law prevails in parts of the Republic, nor the conditions which force into exile those who speak the truth. I cannot believe that the apathy and indifference which so largely obtains regarding mob rule is other than the result of ignorance of the true situation. And yet, the observing and thoughtful must know that in one section, at least, of our common country, a government of the people, by the people, for the people, means a government by the mob. Where the land of the free and the home of the brave means a land of lawlessness, murder, and outrage. And where liberty of speech means the license of might to destroy the business and drive from home those who exercise this privilege contrary to the will of the mob. Repeated attacks on the life, liberty, and happiness of any citizen or class of citizen are attacks on distinctive American institutions. Such attacks, imperiling as they do the foundation of government, law and order, merit the thoughtful consideration of far-sighted Americans, not from a standpoint of sentiment, not even so much from a standpoint of justice to a weak race, as from a desire to preserve our institutions.
Okay, you're getting a gift now. Are you going to set it aside? Or are you going to recognize? We're so proud to hear the voice and the words of Ida B. Wells. Accepting the Max Hall of Fame Award for Ida B. Wells are her great-grandchildren from Chicago, Illinois. Author, speaker, public historian, professor, and champion of racial and gender equity, Michelle Duster, and her brothers, author and motivational speakers, Dan Buster and David Buster, coming to accept in honor of their great-grandmother, Ida B. Wells. What a family, what a legacy. Hallelujah. Ida B. Wells, great-grandchildren.
Thank you so much for having us. And it was amazing to hear our great-grandmother's words spoken by another person named Ida, who was about the same height as our great-grandmother. So you can see a lot of power can be fit into a modest-sized body. So as you can see, our great-grandmother, Ida B. Wells, made an impact on the country and the world. During her lifetime, she was one of the most well-known Americans, and today is considered to be an historical icon. But Ida B. Wells' story should be known by every American today. Our great-grandmother was the epitome of a patriot, but she was written out of history by some of her contemporaries and others up to this day. But our family has done all we can for generations to make sure that her contributions to this country are known. Her daughter, our grandmother, Alfreda Duster, edited and published Ida's autobiography in 1970. Our father's generation started the Ida B. Wells Memorial Foundation in 1988, which my brothers, David and Dan, and I now manage. And my brother Dan and I write, speak, and consult on various programs and projects about our ancestor. Everyone should know about how she, as a journalist, used truth as a weapon to fight against injustice by exposing uncomfortable truths that unsettled the status quo. She endured death threats, her printing press was destroyed, and she was exiled from the South in 1892. Yet she went from Memphis to Brooklyn to the United Kingdom and then Chicago to inform the world about the violence that was taking place all over our country. Her goal was to put an end to the violence, to the lawlessness and the brutality that was all too common during her time. She realized that writing could educate people and appeal to the moral conscience of our country. She realized that the truth was powerful, that statistics and data and names and details of what really happened to victims of domestic terrorism and could impact public opinion and eventually change laws. She was one of the first, say her name, say our name, Black Lives Matter. in the 1890s. She believed that the written word had power, and that was actually the only tool that she had to work with. And I think she yielded with a precision that no one else can actually try. Well, they can try to rival. Not only was she an advocate for truth, justice, and equality, she also was a wife and a mother of 4 children. She was a kind of, an overachiever. Her youngest daughter, Elfrida, had 5 children. And Elfrida had 5 children, and her middle child, Donald, was our father. So David, Daniel, and I, that's how we're great-grandchildren of Ida B. Wells. And here we are 3 generations later, maintaining this legacy. Our great-grandmother passed away over 90 years ago, and people ask us, did you ever meet Ida B. Wells? And we're like, well, we were born after 1931. I mean, black don't crack, but really, really. So it took in this past several decades, Ida has received several honors, and we have worked together to have street names in Chicago and Brooklyn, a national monument in Chicago, historical markers in Chicago and Holly Springs, Mississippi, her hometown, and plus schools in Chicago, Portland, Washington, D.C., and Memphis are named after her, and many other honors, including a postage stamp and on and on. And earlier this year, Dan and I worked with Mattel to create an Ida B. Wells doll. Yes, Dan helped make a doll. He was a great consultant. And in between the projects and the books and the movies about our great-grandmother, she is finally 90 years after she passed away, getting the credit that she deserved. She was very well known during her time, but not necessarily very well liked. Because people don't like it when you tell them stuff they don't want to hear. And she told them and refused to back down. And now all the people across this country are inspired by her story, her strength, her talent, her determination, and her bravery. And despite all of these incredible honors, there's no place like home. It is incredibly special that Ida B. Wells be recognized and celebrated in her home state. Mississippi is known for a whole lot of things. And everybody in this room, I'm sure, has a lot of stories about that. And because of this astounding, beautiful Mississippi arts and entertainment experience, more people will know about the talent and leaders in arts, culture, music, and literature that was influenced by the Mississippi experience. Thank you, Mark Tullis, Marty Gamlin, Wendy West, Aaron Wyndham, Ted Reynolds, Kelly Jean Hill, Stanley Wright, and so many other people. They'll be here all night thanking everybody. And all the others who worked so hard to make this special event, honor, and institution a reality. We know from our experience, this is not easy. So thank you all for your work. So Dave, Dan, and I are truly grateful that our great-grandmother, Ida B. Wells, is among this year's inductees, along with the great and inspiring Alice Walker, Sam Cooke, W.C. Handy, and Marty Stewart. May the next generation know and be proud of all that Mississippi has contributed to the world. Thank you so much for this honor.